This is the Oral History Project at the Mighty 8th Air Force Museum. Today is June 25th, 2003, and today I'm interviewing, and could you tell me your name, please?
Francis Barry.
And Mr. Barry, could you also tell me where and when you were born?
I was born February 23rd, 1922 in Savannah, Georgia.
And then did you grow up in Savannah?
No, I grew up in an orphanage up in about 40 miles north of Augusta in Washington, Georgia. And when I reached the age of 14, I had to come back to Savannah because they didn't have children older than that at the orphanage. And I lived with my sister for about 3 years before I went to the orphanage.
Okay, and what prompted you to decide to join the Army?
Well, I got tired of living and being a bother to other people, if you know what I mean. So I dropped out of high school when the Guard mobilized and went with them. And I must say that it's one of the better decisions I ever made, because I made some lifelong friends, including George DeLoach and his brother, and a fellow named Bill Dykes, who lives in Albany. And we still get together. We comprise the instrument section and our firing battery and the artillery. And George was the instrument sergeant in charge of that group, and the rest of us were corporals. We ran surveys and things of that nature to locate the guns accurately by indirect fire, things like that.
Okay, when you joined the Guard, was that a result of their encampment in Daffin Park?
No, I joined a year before that, in 1939, and simply for the $1 a night Monday drill. Little pocket money, you know. That's big money then, at least for a kid.
Right. And so you're part of the National Guard when it gets mobilized.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts when that happens?
When we mobilized, I was all for it. I had an opportunity to get out that not everyone had, but I choose to go, and I think that was a good decision. I really do. I'd make the same decision again, except probably I wouldn't hesitate like I did.
Okay, and so you're also in service when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th.
Yes, we had just finished a 3 month maneuver in the Carolinas and had gotten back to Fort Jackson, and had been there a week and were home on a weekend pass when Pearl Harbor happened. And that was a Sunday, and of course we were scheduled to go back that evening, which we did. And I guess training intensified somewhat after that, and it kept us pretty busy.
Okay, and then at another point, you have an opportunity to join the aviation cadets. Is that correct?
As George related to you earlier, we took the aviation cadet examination and both passed it. And shortly after that, I guess maybe about a week after that, I was detailed to go to the 29th Division as cadre with like a staff sergeant. And of course, when I went and talked to the adjutant of the regiment, he replaced me with somebody else. And it might have been a fortunate thing, because the 28th called hell on D-Day. And I'm glad I wasn't there.
Okay, so you and George, though, have your paths separate at some point during your aviation
Well, that was when we
training.
went into pre-flight school, wasn't it, George?
Yes.
Yeah, he was in one group and I was in another group. And of course, when we finished the pre-flight, we went to primary school at different bases, and we were separated after that. Prior to that, we were pretty close friends. In fact, the 4 of us were. We still are. But I wasn't very adept as a student pilot, and I washed out. Hell, I couldn't even fly. I couldn't even drive a car then. I don't know what gave me the idea I could fly an airplane.
Okay, so they then direct you to gunnery school, is that right?
Well, regulations say I should have been transferred back to the field artillery, my branch of service. But I got to run around, and they kept me in the Air Force. So I finally gave up. They wore me out trying to get my transfer. Even accused me of trying to avoid going overseas, and that's by a Kiwi, a tactical officer, sitting behind a big fat desk. But I went through training, went to armor school and gunnery school down in Arlington, Texas, and was assigned to a crew at Peyote, Texas, where the 19th Bomb Group was acting as a training center for us. From there we went to Dyersburg for transitional training, and from there we went overseas in January of 1944.
Okay, so what position are you flying in?
I was a ball turret gunner,
In a what plane?
a B-17. And we flew over, we flew to, well, we picked up a plane in Nebraska, Kearney, Nebraska, and flew to, it was supposed to be Bangor, Maine, but weather forced us down in New Hampshire at an air base there. And we stayed there a couple of nights, and from there we flew to Goose Bay, Labrador. And we were weathered in there for about 5 days, and finally flew across the North Atlantic and landed in Scotland.
Okay, without incident, once you
Pardon?
no further incidents with weather.
Well,
No,
it was pretty. The weather was pretty rough over the North Atlantic at that time.
that's
in
what
the
I was
wintertime.
guessing.
In fact, one plane flying with us went down, I understand. And it was pretty stormy. It was a rough flight. We couldn't get over it, and we couldn't get under it. Just, the weather. And when we landed at the air base in Glasgow, Scotland, it was so foggy you couldn't even see the runway. I don't know how the pilot managed to get it in, but they did. And from there, we spent about 3 weeks being indoctrinated before we were assigned to a bomb group. And,
Okay, and which bomb group are you assigned
the
to?
447th. It had come over in December, the previous December, and this was early February. No, end of February when we were assigned to it.
All right,
As
end
a
of
replacement
February
crew.
you're assigned as a replacement crew. The
Yeah.
end of February 1940,
4.
1944.
Yeah. And we flew our first mission on March 16th to Augsburg. We ran into a lot of fighters. They just swarmed up. Almost from the time we crossed coast in France. And they left us alone over the target because they didn't want to get in their own flight. And it was a fight back too. And,
What about fighter escort from the?
well, flight escorts at that time was a sometime thing. They didn't have the extreme range thing that they had later on. So you went at it by yourself for about maybe a third of the way in and a third of the way out. Well, more than that really. It was pretty bad. I did manage to shoot down AME 210 on that first mission.
That was an accomplishment.
Well, it was fortunate that I got the opportunity because he was sitting out there shooting rockets at us. I plugged him pretty good. Second mission, we didn't run into the opposition we had at that one. The second mission was to Munich, and both of them, Augsburg and Munich, were pretty far. They were about 10 or 11 hour flights. And of course, you get up at 7 o'clock. I mean, at 4 o'clock, and you eat breakfast and you briefed and so forth. And you take off around 7 on a long mission like that. And after the second mission, our navigator quit. He was a flight officer.
You mean he said he wasn't going to fly anymore?
Wasn't gonna fly anymore. And of course, we couldn't make the next mission because we didn't have a navigator.
Okay, well, so what did they do with him? Did he stay around on the base, or did he get
Well,
transferred?
they sent him to a psychiatric hospital to examine him, I understand. And he was a good navigator, too. But he was highly excitable and very nervous on the 2 missions we flew. Just sat there with his head in his hands most of the time. So I understand. I didn't see him because I was in my ball turret. In fact, I didn't see anybody. But anyway, we missed the next mission because we didn't have a navigator. But they gave a bombardier a short course of navigation, believe it or not, and then assigned a Targalier to us. And we got a brand new plane for the 3rd mission. Had a nose turret on it and everything, which the other 2 planes didn't have.
Okay.
And we went to Berlin. I think this was the 3rd daylight raid on Berlin, and that's pretty far target. Well, I mean to tell you, they really had the flak over that target. And we took a pretty good pasting. They shot out our oxygen tank, the communication systems, the interphones. And what oxygen we had left were these walk-around bottles that, you'd put on. Because we bombed from an altitude of about 25,000 feet. And when we were hit, it was like 4 explosions right in a row. And the glass plate in my turret shattered, but it didn't fall out. I mean, it just, how glass does when high-tempered glass does it. Of course, I could have kicked it out, but I wouldn't do that. That was a pretty cramped outfit, that ball turret was. But anyway, I had to take the crank out and crank the ball turret up because we lost all power on hydraulic power. And when I got up in the waist and opened the door, you had to point the gun straight down to open it up and crawl out into the waist. And one of the waist gunners was laying on the floor in agony, and we tried to find out how badly he was hurt. He wouldn't let us do it. Turned out it was nothing. Things happen. But anyway, after a short while, we continued on our way. We had dropped out of formation because we were crippled.
Okay, had you dropped your bombs before?
Well, we dropped the bombs, and that's when we were hit, just as we were dropping our bombs.
Okay.
And we struggled on for a while, and the engineer came back. Paul Geis was his name. He came back and told us it looked like we weren't going to make it, and to get ready to bail out when they gave the word. Well, I picked up my chute pack, little 20-foot chute pack when it was open, and hooked it on. I think that's the kind of pack that the paratroopers used as an emergency chute.
Mm-hmm.
And I hooked it on, and I told Paul I'd go back into the tail and tell Sanchez that, get ready to bail out. Well, I had to get down on my hands and knees to go by the tail wheel. B-17 didn't have a tricycle landing gear. It had, landing gear on 2 wheels and a tail wheel. And I had to get down on my knees to crawl by that tail wheel. And when I did, the weight of the chute like this, it flopped out on me. I couldn't believe it. I thought I'd done something wrong. So I got it up, And just about that time, Lou Zalman's kicked off the door, entrance door on the rear end of the fuselage. And the wind caught it and sort of disrupted things instead of just, and I had to gather it in and get past that door where the slipstream wasn't. And I sat on the side and tried to repack that chute. And when I got through, I had a bundle this big. I couldn't even meet my hands.
Okay, I was going to get it on the video. You want to hold up your hands again? Okay, there we go.
Okay?
Yeah.
And when I got through, well, I figured, I was all right. I was shook up pretty bad, needless to say. I looked around, the only one I saw was Blackie. Blackie Starr was our radio operator. I said, where's Ivan Tosh and Zalman? Says, they're going, they jumped. So I thought, we'd getting word to jump. So I said, well, I guess we better go too. And I tried to get up, but I couldn't turn loose to give myself leverage on the sides of the door like that, So I told Becky, give me a boot in the, in the tail. he gave me a shove, and of course I was sweating out, whether I would be able to hold that bundle of silk there, or nylon, to keep it from snagging on the tail. And I did. And I held it as long as I wanted to. But then I worried about, well, when I turn this loose, is it going to deploy properly? And I fell up, I guess, to about 2,000 feet. 10,000 feet. So I said, what the hell, let's have it. Have done with it. And I threw my arms up, and boy, that thing blossomed like a bloom. That was the prettiest sight I ever saw. And I wrote it down, and I went through the undercast, and it was snowing and oscillating very badly. And I came out of the undercast, maybe at about 500 feet, and from then on it was a quick rush to the ground because these chutes were kind of small.
Yeah, were you hurt when you landed?
No, because my feet hit I was coming in sideways, the wind was blowing pretty hard, and I hit a fence on a farmyard, and it flipped me over on my back, and I landed on my back, and the chute dragged me all the way across the pig pen. It was a pig pen. And I had mud going down the collar, coming up down here, believe it or not. And there were goats in there, and sheep, and pigs. And by the time the chute hit the other side of the pen, and that collapsed, so I got up and was taking it over. This fella came running up with says, me Polsky, me Polsky. And he had on these wooden shoes, This was in northern Germany now. Well, I said, I never knew people in Germany wore these. I must be in Holland. But it was Germany, all right. I don't know where it was, but it was pretty close to the border of Holland. Because after the crew in the rear jumped out, the other 5 people, the 4 officers and an engineer, continued flying for a while. And it's an interesting thing now. When everything just quit on the ship, Ed Stoll, the pilot, tried to trim it properly so it would fly out to sea. And he trimmed it, went down the dump. Everybody else was going by that time. And just as he was getting ready to leave, the plane veered over and he went back out and retrimmed it again. So then he went down and he jumped out. Well, the plane came circled around, and according to him, it almost hit him. He thought it was going to hit him when it flew by. But it ended up crashing into downtown Amsterdam at 2nd story level in a school, which fortunately at the time was empty. And it blew up a whole city block, killed 2 civilians. The Germans took the co-pilot around there to look at it. That's why I know. And I've talked to him several times. I think he and I are the only ones left now out of that crew. But anyway, that was the last we saw. The Geis went to the officers' camp at Bath as the president of the officers. And the other five of us, me and Ivan Tosh and Zellers and Sanchez and Stowers, were sent to a camp in Stalag Group 4 in Lithuania. And we stayed there about 4 months. And at that time, the Russians driving down forced the Germans to close that camp. So they evacuated the camp and took us to Memel, a seaport down in Lithuania, and loaded us on a coal scuttle, I call it, a coal boat, called the Insterberg. And we sailed down the Baltic for about 3 days in horrible conditions, crammed into
You were in the hold, weren't you?
in the hole. And we landed at Swinemunde, which is in Pomerania. And it was a big naval base there. As we were taking up, unloaded off the ship, we could see these German warships in it. Every one of them had their guns pointed right at us. I guess they figured, we'd ride or something like that. So they loaded us in these 40 and 8s, and we sat there for a while. And finally, they took us east into Pomerania to a place called Kiefheide. It's near where Kiefheide was just a railroad station for some reason or other. And this was at Stalag Group 4. And while we were in those cars, they chained us with cuffs. 2 together, both leg irons and handcuffs. And when we got to Kiefheide, they had some Kriegsmarines there from off these, and they were armed with fixed bayonets and told us to line up on the road, which we did, and then we started marching. They double timed us.
Okay, did they have dogs too?
Huh?
Did they have dogs with...
Yeah, they had dogs. They sure did. But they ran us down that road. It was about 2 miles.
And you're cuffed with another person with
Yeah.
the wrists and the ankles?
Yeah. And they turned the dogs loose on us. And forced us to throw away anything we had. They gave us 2 food parcels, American Red Cross food parcels when we left the Heidi crew. And we had to throw that away with what we hadn't eaten. And they started clubbing us and bayoneting us. And one dog broke loose and from his handle and got mixed up in the column, and he was stomped to death. And I think what they were trying to do was trying to make us break for the woods, And you could, every once in a while, you couldn't help but notice that there was machine guns lined up on one side of the road, and that's all they were waiting on, for us to break, and they would have cut loose on us. But we didn't. We stayed at this particular camp, and it was what they call a straf camp. Straf means a punishment camp. And for some reason, the airmen weren't very popular among the German personnel. I thought we were going to get lynched in Frankfurt when they were first shot down, but a couple of policemen came along and helped out the guards, because the civilians were pretty upset. They'd been bombed the night before we got there. Well, I'm rambling here now. But we stayed at Kiefheide for about 7 months. And,
Okay, were you injured on that forced run?
pardon?
Were you injured on that forced run?
I was bayoneted in the buttocks, yeah. Wasn't anything to get excited about, but a lot of guys had their heads split open with rifle butts and things like that, so I didn't suffer near as much as some of them did.
What about the man you were shackled to?
He was Blackie. Blackie Stowers. He was from Tyler, what was it? Place in the Florida Panhandle. I forget where it was. But we were together the whole time in prison camp, he and I, pretty close. And after about 7 months, and it wasn't a very pleasant place to be, that started with 4.
Was there any first aid for the injuries once you got there?
Yeah, they gave you aspirin if you wanted it. That was about it. But we were forced out of that camp, had to evacuate that camp too. And so you've heard about this before. I figured. But we had to walk out of there. And we walked for 86 days.
Okay, what about shoes? Were you...
Shoes, I got a brand new pair of shoes the night before we left.
You want to tell me about that?
Huh?
You want to... When you jumped out of the plane, you probably still had on your flight boots, right?
Well, I had on
Or not?
heated boots. They were felt with rubber soles, and they hooked up to your suit. They were heated boots, and they were very fragile. Other than that, up until that time, I had straw sandals with wooden soles. But before the march, I got a pair of GI clodhoppers, as they call them. And first day out, my sock got wrinkled and I got a blister on my heel. But that's the only blister I got the whole time. But those shoes got wet, and they stayed wet for the next 86 days. And I tell you what, I was never so cold, I was never so hungry for so long in all my life. I weighed 165 pounds when I went in there. That was my normal weight. When I was little rated, I weighed 85 pounds. And we slept on the ground. We slept out in the open in the winter, below zero weather. And we paralleled the Baltic coast all the way across Germany. And we got to, in 2 months, we got to a place called Fallingbostel, where they had several camps. And we were put in an infantry camp, a British infantry camp. And we stayed there a week, and then after a week, we drove us out of that camp. We headed back the same way we'd come. We spent another 30 days on the road down when we were finally liberated. And,
Okay, why don't you tell me about how you were liberated?
well, the guards picked up and left. And the next morning, we got up, they were gone. And a British officer, a recon outfit, pulled into this farmyard. And he said, we'll have some people coming up. Just sit here and wait. Well, we waited half a day and got tired of that. So everybody decided to go. There weren't about 200 of us left out of that group I'd been in. I don't know what happened to all of them. Some of them died of pneumonia. Some of them put in the hospitals. Different things like that.
Okay, is your friend still with you?
David, yeah. Yeah. And you know, that's the last I saw him. After that, I hadn't seen him since the day we were liberated. Because we walked into the nearest town and there was nothing there. There was sheets hanging on the building, you know, and everything. And we were there about, maybe a couple of hours just waiting. And here comes the 7th Army Division barreling through town. They were assigned, that was the U.S. Army. They were assigned to the British Army because we were in the British sector. The British liberated us and sent us to Lunenburg, and God, I was so hungry I couldn't eat the sandwich they gave me. I remember one time on that march, got some barley, and that was, wow, good hot cereal. And I was so hungry, I was nauseated. And I gave it away. Well, anyway, I ended up back in under control of the U.S. Army sometime in June. Camp Lucky Strike, and from there they shipped us home on a boat. Landed in Newport News end of June. Had a 90-day furlough. And from there I went to San Antonio after that to be discharged and came back home. And George, he stayed in the Air Force. Strange thing. From Newport News, I went to Fort McPherson in Atlanta. And who should I run into? Well, I got on a train to come to Savannah. Who should I run into? But George.
That was a nice homecoming, wasn't it?
Oh, well. That's it.
Well, can I back you up a little bit and ask a few questions?
Mm-hmm.
All right, when you landed in that pig pen and that farmer came towards you, did he turn you in or did he help you
Well,
any?
he was a slave laborer was what he was. He was a Polish son of that farm. And at the same time, I tried to give him a parachute and walk off, you know, and he kept bothering me. And as I started to climb the fence and head for the woods, people from 3 different directions came. One of them was on with a shotgun, and another had an axe, and a third one had a pitchfork or something like that. So I said, what the hell? You know, here I am in the middle of Germany in wintertime. I ain't got well. So that's how they captured me.
Okay, did they harm you at this point?
No. They waited. I waited in that farmhouse in the barn, which was attached to the farmhouse, till a policeman came, and he came riding up on a bicycle, and he had a rifle slung across his back. He told me to take my parachute and let's go. So down the road a ways at the fork in the road, it was Blackie, David Stowers, was waiting on him with a farmer with a shotgun guarding him. So we walked into that town, and we got to town, and the outskirts of town, all these little kids started gathering around. And meanwhile, the policeman had taken my parachute and put it on the back of his bicycle, which I thought was pretty nice on him because it was wet and heavy. But these little kids, there was one little boy, he must have been about 5, maybe 6 years old at the most. And he looked up at me trotting along and said, "Baby killer." I said, Nix, yeah, baby killer. And that went on for a couple, 3 blocks till we got to the jailhouse. And they took us upstairs and sat us in an office with a terrible looking redhead police chief. He looked like an ogre. And he kept insisting that I could understand and speak German because I knew, I'd say, "Nichts verstehen." That's about all I knew. He says, "Ja, sprechen die Dutch?" And I says, "Nix, nein." But he insisted. Well, he didn't do anything, but he fussed at us, and I didn't understand a word what he was saying. We sat there maybe about 45 minutes. Meanwhile, they had picked up Sanchez and Ivantosh and brought them in. So they put four of us down in what I call a dungeon. It was a cell about maybe 10 feet long and about 5 feet wide with concrete bunks on each side and a little aisle in the middle. And we were in there for till it was dark, I guess. And they took us out of there and put us in the back of a truck, so all guards, and took us to this air base. And they interrogated us there, and didn't seem to bother us. By that time we were worn out, and Sanchez was the last one to be interrogated. And they took us, put us in a cell, and I immediately crawled in the bunk and slept. And when I woke up the next morning, Sanchez passed out sandwiches to the other four of us, because Louis Armas had come out there too. Big old slabs of corned beef in there, canned corned beef. Boy, that tasted pretty good. But that's all we got to eat that day. But that night they gave us a pretty good meal, and from there we progressed on to Frankfurt, to the interrogation center. And like I say, we had blown the marshalling yards the night before. When we got off the railroad station, we had two elderly guards with us, and there must have been about 10 of us then. And people started gathering, and it was beginning to get pretty ugly, and several soldiers came along and dispersed the crowd. But they carried us by public conveyance on the railroads, and we got a lot of static from people riding the trains, that passed by us. And on the trolley cars in Frankfurt, same thing. Stayed in Frankfurt overnight, and they put us on trains and took us to Saigon, and wanted to know if we wanted to be body service to the officers' camp. I told them, hell no. I'd had enough officers. That was. And so those that didn't volunteer, they put us back on the train, took us up to Lithuania. On that march that took place, we were strafed twice by the British. We were a column of prisoners marching, and on the first time they caught us flat-footed, but they killed about 60 prisoners and several guards. But the second time they strafed us, we were watching out then. And I think the only thing they killed that time was a mule, which we cut up and ate.
Okay, did you see any further examples of how the Germans treated individuals? You saw the Polish forced labor at the beginning. Did you see any other examples?
Yeah, there was a lot of cases of that in the camp, particularly in Stalag 4. Stalag 6 wasn't that bad, but although they did kill a couple of prisoners up there that were trying to escape.
Were you there when one person went out too early in the morning, I think?
You've heard this one too. He was laying in the middle of an open space where we gathered to have a pill, and he lay there for at least 20 or 30 minutes before the Germans came and got him. But it's tragic because that it happened. Because the guard had neglected to lock. He was in one of these little huts at the end of the row, and it was a long walk to the wash house. The guard had neglected to lock the door on the outside. A prisoner got up, found the door unlocked, walked up, went to the wash house, did what he did, walked back, came in the door. Second guy figured it was all right, so he went out too. And he didn't even get to the wash house. God shot him just like that. No warning, anything else. Plain murder. Hey, I was sitting in a latrine one day, and it must have been about maybe a dozen holes, you know, and there was a slit trench underneath, but they had built up seats on the top of it. And I was sitting there doing my business, and some guy walked in, he lifted her up, and he yelled down the hole. He said down there, "Hey, Joe," he says, "about time to eat, you better come on out." And I thought, God, going stir crazy. The boy up there says, "Be right up." They were digging a tunnel down there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about escape attempts. Were they organized, or did just certain individuals try things?
They were organized, but not as well as they apparently were in the officers' camp. We had what they call an escape committee. If you wanted help, they would give it to you, but you had to have a good plan. And if they approved it, they would help you. But if they didn't, you were on your own. But it was almost impossible to get out. There were two Americans. Tried to get out. Had an excellent plan, but got caught, and one of them was killed. Funny thing on that march, this guy was in my group at both camps. His name was Willie Carr from Massachusetts. We came to a small town one time. The columns always stopped in these towns so people could look at us, you know, and harass us. And his name was John Carr. John Carr said, Willie didn't, it was John Carr. He was leaning against the fence, and a lady came out of the door and started beating the hell out of him with a broom. And the guard, he laughed and walked away. And the minute he walked away, that old gal pulled out 2 loaves of bread and gave them to John.
That bread must have been really appreciated.
Huh?
He must have really appreciated that bread. Did he share it with the rest of you?
Of course, John shared it with us. You know, of course, we needed it badly because they weren't giving us any food on that march. What we got, we had to steal. And the easiest thing to steal was the seed potatoes, and the farmers didn't like that. And they quartered us one time in a series of smokehouses, and we stole a lot of meat that was hanging in there. And boy, they really didn't like that. They were going to shoot somebody. Caught them with the meat down. Fortunately, they didn't do it. They got just about all the meat back, too. You know, smoked hams and things like that, you know. Plenty of food, but they just didn't give it to us. It was good farmland up there. And it was a real traumatic period. And you know, I I read in the paper today where, you know, when they liberate these people in Iraq and back in the 90s and just this past spring, and they liberate them, rush them to the hospital right away. I didn't get an examination until 1983. And it wouldn't happen if it hadn't been for a law that Congress passed. The Army just absolutely forgot about us the minute we were out. And I had problems. Well, so much for that.
Well, I want to thank you for doing this with me today. Is there something you want to add before we turn off the cameras?
No, but I think you're doing a good thing here.
Well, I was going to conclude this by saying that it's the hope of this museum to make sure that the role of the 8th Air Force and the sacrifices that each member made are never forgotten.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I will say that George and I finally got reunited back at Georgia Tech.
okay, I want to hear that story because so you used the GI Bill too?
Huh?
Did you use the GI Bill
Yeah, I
after
sure
the war?
did. Sure did. I got a head start on him though. I started in '46. I went straight through and graduated in '49. But we had about a year and a half together up there.
Okay, he was a chemical engineer major. What did you select?
Industrial management. I'm not too good at math. But it was a good course. The course I took was tailor-made for me. And I worked at it too. Worked in Savannah as an industrial supervisor. And retired in early 1986. And from Union Camp, and of course it's an international paper company now.
Right.
For what it's worth.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much for doing this. And unless either one of you thinks of something to add, do you?
Well, yes. When we came back, he from Europe and I from South Pacific, I left from the Philippines by boat, and we landed at Angel Island, which is where Alcatraz is, you know. And most of my crew were with me on the boat. We were planning a big celebration at the top of the Mark Hopkins Hotel in San Francisco, but they didn't release us. They took us by ferry to a dock and loaded us on a troop train right on the dock, and went all the way to Fort McPherson in Atlanta, and I got processed there before leave. When they released me, I was debating whether to take the puddle jumping train that took all night to get to Savannah or wait till the next day and get an express job, you know. Decided I'd go ahead and get on the train, and as he told you, as I walked down looking for a seat, I found him already on the train waiting there, coming from opposite sides of the world, and we just ran right back into each other.
And so you've maintained your friendship ever since, right?
Yes. There are 4 of us that were all in the same section in the field artillery. My brother and Frank and Bill Dykes and I. And as Frank told you, we still get together with some regularity in Savannah. There was one thing I had after I had finished my tour. We were in the Philippines, and my flight engineer went to the squadron commander and told him he wasn't going to fly anymore. And and because he had missed some flights, he hadn't quite met qualifications for coming home. So he only needed one more mission, and the squadron commander told him he would be in serious trouble if he didn't go ahead and fly the other mission. He said he wasn't going to fly with anybody but Deloach. So the squadron commander asked if I would fly another mission and as an instructor pilot to a new crew and allow him to go along as an instructor engineer. So we did that and flew a mission to Canton, China from Mindoro in the Philippines. He completed his tour and got to come home with the rest of us.
And you got an extra mission on yours.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else either one of you wants to add?
I don't think so. This is all ancient history now.
Not quite. Okay, well, I want to thank you both very much, and at this point we'll turn off the camera unless we think of something else, and then we can always start again.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're